The giant mare was in active labor when she abandoned the safety of the prepared stall and disappeared into the forest where predators hunted and help could not reach her. Sarah had less than an hour to find her before both mother and unborn foal paid the ultimate price. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go! The morning mist hung low over Willow Creek Valley, a place where ancient trees stood like silent guardians over secrets that only the forest knew. Sarah Mitchell had lived on the edge of this wilderness for nearly 30 years. Her small horse sanctuary nestled between the meadows and the deep woods that stretched endlessly toward the mountains. She was known throughout the county as the woman with a gift, someone who could calm the wildest stallion with nothing more than a whisper and a gentle touch. Her sanctuary housed 12 horses, each one a rescue, each one carrying scars from a past that humans had inflicted upon them. But among all her beloved animals, there was one that held a special place in her heart. Athena was her name, a magnificent Percheron draft horse whose size was matched only by her gentle spirit. Standing over 18 hands tall and weighing nearly 2,000 pounds, Athena was truly a giant among horses. Her coat shimmered like polished copper in the sunlight, and her blonde mane cascaded down her powerful neck like strands of golden silk. When Sarah had found her 3 years ago, Athena had been nothing more than skin and bones, discarded by a logging company that deemed her too old and too slow for the grueling work they demanded. Sarah remembered that day vividly, the way Athena's sad eyes had met hers with a mixture of resignation and a tiny flicker of hope that refused to die. Over the years, Sarah had watched Athena transform from a broken, defeated creature into a majestic being who radiated dignity and strength. The mare had become the heart of the sanctuary, a calming presence that helped newly rescued horses adjust to their new life. Other horses gravitated toward her, seeking comfort in her steady demeanor and protective nature. Sarah often joked that Athena was her co-therapist, healing the wounded souls that arrived at their gates. 6 months ago, Sarah had made a decision that some might have questioned. She had allowed Athena to be bred with Thunder, a magnificent Percheron stallion from a neighboring farm whose bloodlines were impeccable. The owner, Michael, was a kind man who shared Sarah's philosophy about treating horses with respect and compassion. Some people told Sarah she was crazy, that Athena was too old for pregnancy, that complications could arise. But Sarah had seen something in Athena's eyes, a longing perhaps, a desire to fulfill a natural purpose that had been denied to her during all those years of hard labor and neglect. She had consulted with her veterinarian, Dr. Helena Rodriguez, who examined Athena thoroughly and gave a cautious but optimistic approval. The pregnancy had progressed beautifully. Athena glowed with an inner radiance that seemed to grow stronger with each passing month. Her belly swelled magnificently, and Sarah would often stand in the paddock, her hand resting on that warm, rounded side, feeling the powerful kicks of the foal growing within. She talked to Athena constantly, telling her what a wonderful mother she would be, promising that this foal would know nothing but love and kindness from the moment it entered the world. Dr. Rodriguez visited regularly, monitoring Athena's health and the foal's development. Everything indicated a healthy pregnancy, and they calculated that Athena would give birth sometime in early autumn, when the weather was still mild and the grass was lush and green. Sarah had prepared the large foaling stall with fresh straw, installed a camera system so she could monitor Athena day and night, and kept her phone close at all times. She had read every book on horse breeding she could find, watched countless videos, and even attended a workshop on foaling management. She wanted to be prepared for every possibility, every potential complication. But nature, as Sarah well knew, had its own schedule and its own plans that rarely aligned perfectly with human expectations. On a Thursday morning in late September, Sarah noticed that Athena seemed restless. The mare paced along the fence line of her paddock, her tail swishing more than usual, her ears constantly moving, as if listening to something Sarah could not hear. When Sarah approached her, Athena nickered softly but did not come to greet her as she usually did. Instead, she remained near the far corner of the paddock, closest to the forest edge. Sarah felt a flutter of concern, but reminded herself that horses often became restless in the days before giving birth. She checked Athena's udder and noted that it had filled significantly, a sign that birth was imminent. She made a mental note to bring Athena into the foaling stall that evening, just to be safe. Throughout the morning, Sarah went about her usual routines, feeding the other horses, mucking out stalls, and repairing a section of fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. But her mind kept returning to Athena, and every time she glanced toward the paddock, she saw the giant mare standing at the forest edge, staring into the trees with an intensity that seemed almost purposeful. By midday, Sarah's concern had grown into genuine worry. She walked out to the paddock with a halter and lead rope, intending to bring Athena into the barn. But as she approached, calling the mare's name in her gentle, familiar voice, Athena did something completely unexpected. The mare turned her massive head to look at Sarah, and in her dark, intelligent eyes, there was a message so clear that it needed no words. Then, with a determination that seemed to come from some ancient instinct buried deep in her blood, Athena turned away from Sarah and walked into the forest. Not quickly, not in panic, but with purpose and resolve. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, shock rendering her immobile. She called out, her voice rising with alarm. But Athena did not stop. The giant mare disappeared between the massive trunks of old-growth trees, her copper coat blending into the dappled shadows of the forest floor. Sarah's heart began to race as realization crashed over her like a cold wave. Athena was in labor, and she had chosen to give birth not in the safe, prepared stall that Sarah had made ready, but in the wild forest where dangers lurked in every shadow. Sarah did not waste another second. She dropped the halter and lead rope where she stood and ran toward the house, her boots pounding against the hard-packed earth of the yard. Her mind raced faster than her feet, calculating everything she would need, everything that could go wrong, every possible scenario that might unfold in the depths of that forest. She burst through the kitchen door and grabbed her emergency veterinary kit from the closet. A large canvas bag that contained everything from obstetric gloves to antiseptic solutions, from towels to emergency medications. Her hands trembled slightly as she slung the bag over her shoulder and reached for her phone. She dialed Dr. Rodriguez's number with fumbling fingers, praying that the veterinarian would answer, despite the middle-of-the-day hour when she was likely elbow-deep in another emergency somewhere in the county. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, and Sarah felt her anxiety spike with each unanswered tone. Finally, on the 4th ring, Dr. Rodriguez's familiar voice came through the speaker. Sarah did not bother with pleasantries or explanations. Her words tumbled out in a rush, painting the situation in urgent strokes. Athena had gone into labor and had walked into the forest. She needed to find her, needed to make sure both mare and foal survived whatever ordeal awaited them in the wilderness. Dr. Rodriguez's response was immediate and decisive. She would come as soon as she finished with her current patient, probably within an hour, but Sarah could not wait that long. The veterinarian gave rapid instructions, reminding Sarah of the signs of normal labor progression versus dangerous complications, telling her to call immediately if she saw anything concerning. Above all, Dr. Rodriguez emphasized, Sarah needed to stay calm. Animals sensed human anxiety, and Athena would need her to be a steady, reassuring presence, not a source of additional stress. Sarah thanked her and ended the call, then grabbed a large thermos that she quickly filled with warm water. She threw several more clean towels into her bag, added a flashlight even though it was daylight, and at the last moment grabbed a machete from the tool shed. The forest could be treacherous, with fallen branches and dense undergrowth that might slow her down, when speed could mean the difference between life and death. As she headed back toward the paddock, she noticed that two of her other horses, Willow and Storm, were standing at the fence line, their heads turned toward the forest, ears pricked forward with obvious concern. They knew something was happening, sensed the disruption in the normal rhythm of their sanctuary. Sarah paused just long enough to speak to them softly, promising that she would bring Athena home safely, though she was not entirely sure she believed her own words. The entrance to the forest where Athena had disappeared was marked by a game trail that Sarah had walked many times over the years. She knew these woods relatively well, at least the outer edges, though she rarely ventured deep into the interior where the old-growth trees created a canopy so thick that the sun barely penetrated. The trail was narrow, barely wide enough for a human to walk comfortably, and Sarah could not imagine how Athena, with her massive bulk, had managed to navigate through it. But the evidence was clear. Disturbed leaves, broken twigs, and deep hoof prints in the soft earth told the story of the mare's passage. Sarah followed these signs, moving as quickly as the terrain allowed, her eyes constantly scanning the path ahead while her ears strained to catch any sound that might indicate Athena's location. The forest closed around her like a living entity. The sounds of the sanctuary, the neighing of horses, and the distant hum of traffic from the county road faded into silence. Here, beneath the cathedral of ancient trees, the world operated according to different rules, older laws that predated human civilization. Sarah's breath came in quick gasps, partly from exertion and partly from the anxiety that threatened to overwhelm her composure. She forced herself to slow down, to breathe deeply, to remember Dr. Rodriguez's advice about staying calm. Panicking would help no one, least of all Athena. The trail wound deeper into the forest, climbing gradually as the terrain rose toward the foothills of the mountains. Sarah checked her phone and saw that she had no signal, which did not surprise her but still sent a small jolt of unease through her system. She was alone out here, cut off from help, relying entirely on her own knowledge and instincts. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 15 minutes, Sarah heard something that made her stop in her tracks. It was a low, rumbling sound, almost like a groan, coming from somewhere ahead and to her left. She recognized it immediately as a vocalization of pain and effort, the sound a mare makes when contractions grip her body and demand every ounce of her strength. Sarah pushed through a thick stand of ferns and emerged into a small clearing that nature had carved out when an ancient oak had fallen years ago, creating a gap in the canopy that allowed sunlight to stream through. And there, in the center of that natural cathedral, stood Athena. The giant mare was standing with her legs braced wide, her head lowered, her entire body tense with the power of the contractions that rippled through her. Her copper coat was already darkened with sweat, and her breathing came in deep, labored huffs that created small clouds of mist in the cool forest air. Sarah approached slowly, speaking in a soft, continuous murmur that she hoped would soothe rather than startle. Athena's ears swiveled toward the sound of Sarah's voice, acknowledging her presence, but the mare did not move from her chosen spot. As Sarah came closer, she understood with sudden clarity why Athena had chosen this place. The fallen oak had created a natural shelter, its massive trunk forming one wall, while its upturned root system created another. The ground here was covered in soft moss, and layers of decomposed leaves, creating a cushioned surface far more yielding than the straw Sarah had prepared in the foaling stall. The clearing was protected from wind, dappled with gentle sunlight, and possessed a sense of ancient peace that no human-made structure could replicate. This was where Athena had decided her foal should be born, in a place that resonated with something deep and primal in her equine soul. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she realized the profound trust Athena was showing by allowing her to witness this moment. By not running farther into the forest, Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she realized the profound trust Athena was showing by allowing her to witness this moment. By not running farther into the forest to ensure complete solitude. Sarah set down her emergency kit and moved into position where she could observe Athena without crowding her. Years of experience had taught her that horses in labor needed space and autonomy, that too much human interference could actually slow or complicate the birthing process. Her role was to be present, to watch for signs of trouble, and to intervene only if absolutely necessary. She pulled out her phone to check the time, noting that it was now 1:15 in the afternoon, and made a mental note to track the progression of labor. Normal equine birth typically took anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour once active labor began, and anything significantly longer could indicate problems that required immediate veterinary assistance. She watched as another contraction gripped Athena's massive body, a few steps in a tight circle, before stopping again and assuming the same wide-legged stance. Sarah recognized this behavior as normal, the mare's way of trying to find a position that eased the discomfort and helped the foal navigate the birth canal. She whispered constant encouragement, her voice a steady anchor in the midst of this profound natural event. Time seemed to both crawl and race simultaneously. Sarah was acutely aware of every passing minute, yet also felt suspended in a timeless bubble where nothing existed except this clearing, this mare, and the new life struggling to enter the world. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath in solidarity, the usual rustling of small animals and birdsong muted as if nature itself recognized the sacred nature of what was unfolding. Another contraction came, stronger than the previous ones, and this time Sarah saw what she had been watching for. The amniotic sac appeared, a translucent bluish-white membrane that glistened in the dappled sunlight. This was the moment when Sarah's full attention became critical. She needed to ensure that the foal was positioned correctly, that its front hooves and nose were presenting first in the proper birth position. Any deviation from this could spell disaster for both mare and baby. She moved closer, careful to stay at Athena's shoulder rather than directly behind her where she might be kicked if the mare startled. Athena's breathing had changed, becoming more rapid and shallow, interspersed with deep grunts of effort as her body worked to expel the foal. Sarah could see the strain in every line of the mare's body, the way her muscles quivered with exhaustion even as they continued their relentless contractions. The sac pushed farther out, and Sarah felt a flood of relief as she glimpsed two small hooves, perfectly positioned, with the soles facing downward. This was exactly what she wanted to see. The foal was in the correct anterior presentation, meaning the front legs and head would emerge first, the safest and most natural position for equine birth. She reached out and gently touched Athena's shoulder, a gesture of support and solidarity, and the mare briefly turned her head to look at Sarah with eyes that held a mixture of pain, determination, and something that looked remarkably like gratitude. In that moment, Sarah felt the full weight of the trust Athena had placed in her by not fleeing deeper into the forest where no human could follow. The mare had wanted her here, had perhaps even needed her presence to feel secure enough to complete this vulnerable process. Another massive contraction, and suddenly the foal's head appeared, still encased in the membrane, its tiny muzzle visible through the translucent covering. Sarah held her breath, counting the seconds, knowing that the foal needed to emerge quickly now to avoid oxygen deprivation. Athena groaned deeply, a sound that came from the very core of her being, and pushed with every ounce of strength her giant body possessed. The foal's shoulders cleared the birth canal, and then, in a rush of fluid and membrane, the rest of the baby slipped out onto the soft forest floor. Sarah immediately sprang into action. She grabbed a clean towel from her kit and carefully cleared the membrane away from the foal's nostrils and mouth, ensuring the airways were open and unobstructed. The foal, still wet and steaming in the cool air, took its first shuddering breath, and Sarah felt tears of joy stream down her face. It was alive, it was breathing, and from what she could see in her quick assessment, it appeared healthy and whole. Athena, exhausted from her ordeal, stood still for several moments, her sides heaving as she caught her breath. Then, driven by instinct as powerful as the contractions that had just racked her body, she turned and lowered her massive head to her newborn. Sarah stepped back, giving them space for this crucial first meeting. She watched in awe as Athena began to nuzzle and lick her baby, cleaning the foal with long, gentle strokes of her tongue, stimulating its circulation and bonding with it through scent and touch. The foal, a beautiful colt with the same copper coloring as his mother, and a blonde mane that was already visible despite being plastered wet against his tiny neck, responded to his mother's ministrations with small movements and soft, snuffling sounds. Sarah used this moment to do a more thorough examination from a distance. The colt appeared to be a good size, probably around 150 pounds, which was healthy for a Percheron foal. His legs, though impossibly long and gangly as all foal legs are, seemed straight and well-formed. His breathing was steady and regular, and his eyes, when they briefly opened, were bright and clear. The umbilical cord had broken naturally at the appropriate place, and there was no sign of excessive bleeding. Sarah pulled out her phone again and noted the time. 1:38. The entire labor and delivery had taken just over 20 minutes from when she had found Athena, which was well within normal parameters. She tried calling Dr. Rodriguez, but the call would not connect, the lack of cell signal preventing her from sharing the good news or receiving guidance on next steps. Sarah settled herself on a moss-covered log at the edge of the clearing, maintaining her watchful presence while allowing Athena the space to bond with her newborn. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the canopy above, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow across the forest floor where mother and son lay together. Athena continued her gentle ministrations, her enormous head moving with surprising delicacy as she cleaned every inch of her colt's small body. The sounds of the forest gradually returned, as if nature had decided the crisis had passed and normal life could resume. A woodpecker tapped somewhere in the distance, and Sarah could hear the rustling of leaves as a breeze stirred the upper branches of the ancient trees surrounding them. She took a moment to simply breathe and marvel at what had just transpired, at the miracle of new life entering the world in this wild, untamed place. The colt was becoming more active with each passing minute. His legs, which had been folded beneath him in the position he had held inside his mother's womb, began to stretch and move experimentally. Sarah knew that foals typically attempted to stand within an hour of birth, driven by an instinct that told them mobility meant survival in a world where predators might lurk. Even here, in this relatively safe forest, that ancient programming remained strong. She watched as the colt made his first attempts to organize his impossibly long legs into something resembling a functional arrangement. He struggled, his hooves scrambling against the soft earth and moss, his tiny body swaying as he tried to figure out the mechanics of standing. Athena watched her son's efforts with what could only be described as maternal concern, occasionally nickering softly as if offering encouragement. The mare had lain down beside her foal, her massive body curved protectively around him, and now she too began the process of rising to her feet. Athena stood slowly, her legs trembling slightly from exhaustion, but she managed to regain her footing with the steady determination that characterized everything about her. Once standing, she positioned herself close to her colt, offering her body as a support structure he could lean against. The colt took full advantage of this assistance, pressing his small frame against his mother's sturdy legs, as he made another attempt to stand. This time he managed to get his front legs extended, pushing his chest off the ground, but his back legs remained folded. He hung there for a moment in this awkward position before collapsing again with a small grunt of frustration. Sarah smiled despite herself, remembering all the foals she had watched go through this same struggle over the years. It never got less endearing, watching these miniature horses figure out how to operate the bodies they had been given. The colt rested for a few minutes, gathering his strength for another attempt. Athena used this time to pass the placenta, a necessary final stage of the birthing process. Sarah moved forward to check it, needing to ensure that it had been expelled completely and intact. An retained placenta could lead to serious infection and potentially fatal complications for the mare. She examined it carefully, methodically checking that all the membranes were present, that nothing had torn away and remained inside Athena. Satisfied that everything appeared normal, she used a stick to move it away from the immediate birthing area and made a mental note of its location. Dr. Rodriguez would want to see it when she arrived to do her post-birth examination. Sarah then pulled out her emergency kit and retrieved the iodine solution she carried for treating umbilical stumps. She approached Athena slowly, speaking in soothing tones, and the mare allowed her to gently apply the antiseptic to the colt's umbilical cord remnant. This simple treatment would help prevent infection, one of the leading causes of foal mortality in the critical first days of life. With that task completed, Sarah returned to her watching post, knowing that the next major milestone would be the colt's successful standing and his first attempts to nurse. These were crucial indicators of his health and viability. A foal that could not stand or nurse would require immediate intervention, possibly even emergency veterinary care, that would be extremely difficult to provide in this remote forest location. She checked her phone again, hoping perhaps that she had moved to a spot with better reception, but the screen still showed no signal. She sent a silent prayer to whatever forces might be listening that everything would continue to go smoothly, that Dr. Rodriguez would arrive soon, and that they would all make it back to the sanctuary safely before nightfall. The thought of spending a night in the forest, with a newborn foal and an exhausted mother mare, was not something she wanted to contemplate, though she knew she would do it if necessary. The colt stirred again, his renewed energy apparent in the more vigorous movements of his legs. This time, when he attempted to stand, he managed to get all four legs underneath him, though they splayed out at odd angles like a table with uneven legs. He wobbled dramatically, his whole body shaking with the effort of maintaining this precarious balance. Athena stood perfectly still, allowing her son to use her as a brace while he figured out the complex coordination required for standing. Sarah found herself holding her breath, silently willing the little colt to succeed. His legs gradually drew closer together, finding a more stable configuration, and suddenly he was standing, truly standing, on his own 4 feet. The achievement lasted only a few seconds before his legs gave out, and he crumpled back to the ground. But those few seconds represented a monumental victory. Athena nickered proudly, lowering her head to nuzzle her colt, as if congratulating him on his accomplishment. The baby responded by making small suckling motions with his mouth, an instinctive behavior that signaled his body knew what it needed even if he had not yet figured out how to obtain it. He would need to nurse soon, ideally within the first 2 hours of life, to receive the colostrum that would provide him with essential antibodies and nutrients. Sarah knew that Athena's first milk was rich with everything the colt needed to build his immune system and give him the best possible start in life. The colt made several more attempts at standing over the next 20 minutes, each one lasting a bit longer than the previous attempt, his confidence and coordination improving with practice. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the colt had finally mastered the art of standing with reasonable stability. His legs still trembled with the effort, and his balance remained precarious, but he could maintain an upright position for several minutes at a time without collapsing. Sarah watched with growing relief as he began to explore his immediate surroundings with the cautious curiosity of all newborns. His tiny hooves, still soft and covered with the feathery tissue that had protected Athena's womb during pregnancy, made almost no sound as he took his first experimental steps. Each movement was an adventure, each shift of weight a calculated risk that sometimes resulted in a tumble back to the soft forest floor. But with each fall he learned, and with each recovery he grew stronger. Athena remained close, her massive presence a constant source of comfort and security, her watchful eyes never leaving her precious son. The next challenge, and perhaps the most critical one, was getting the colt to nurse. Sarah knew that time was becoming a factor. While foals had some flexibility and when they took their first meal, the sooner they received colostrum, the better their chances of developing a strong immune system. The colt seemed to understand that food was somewhere in the vicinity of his mother, but his attempts to find the source were comically misguided. He nuzzled Athena's shoulder, her neck, even her front legs, searching for the milk that his body craved. Athena tried to help by positioning herself strategically, but the colt's lack of experience made the process frustratingly difficult. Sarah resisted the urge to intervene, knowing that mother and baby needed to figure this out together, that her interference might actually make things more complicated. After several failed attempts that left the colt whinnying in frustration and Athena shifting her weight anxiously, Sarah decided that a little gentle guidance might be acceptable. She approached slowly, speaking in the calm, reassuring tones that Athena knew so well. The mare allowed Sarah to come close, trusting her even in this vulnerable moment. Sarah gently placed her hand on the colt's small rump and applied the lightest pressure, guiding him toward Athena's udder. The colt resisted at first, uncertain about this strange creature that was trying to direct his movements, but hunger proved to be a powerful motivator. When his searching mouth finally found one of Athena's teats and latched on, the change in his demeanor was immediate and dramatic. His entire body relaxed as the warm, rich colostrum began to flow into his mouth, satisfying the primal need that had been driving his increasingly desperate search. Sarah stepped back, her eyes blurring with tears of relief and joy. This was the sign she had been waiting for, the confirmation that the colt was healthy and vigorous enough to nurse on his own. She watched as he drank eagerly, his small tail swishing with contentment, while Athena stood perfectly still, her eyes half closed, in what appeared to be a state of peaceful satisfaction. The bond between them was almost tangible, a connection forged in the crucible of birth and strengthened with every passing moment they spent together. Sarah pulled out her phone and attempted once more to reach Dr. Rodriguez, but the signal remained frustratingly absent. She made a note of the time that the colt had successfully nursed, 3:27, information that the veterinarian would want to know when she finally arrived. The forest around them continued its afternoon routine, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded in this small clearing. A deer appeared at the edge of the tree line, its brown coat blending almost perfectly with the bark of the surrounding trunks. It watched the unlikely scene with large, liquid eyes, its ears rotating forward with interest. Athena noticed the deer, but showed no alarm, perhaps recognizing a kindred spirit, another mother who understood the fierce protective instincts that now governed every aspect of her behavior. The deer watched for a few more moments before melting back into the forest, leaving only the faintest rustle of disturbed foliage to mark its passage. Sarah found herself thinking about the wildness of this place, about how appropriate it seemed that Athena had chosen to give birth here, surrounded by the untamed beauty of nature rather than the sterile safety of a barn stall. The colt finished nursing and took a few wobbly steps away from his mother, his belly now rounded with the nourishment he had consumed. He explored the clearing with growing confidence, sniffing at the moss-covered log where Sarah sat, investigating a shaft of sunlight that illuminated the forest floor, and generally behaving like a healthy, curious foal. Athena kept him within a tight radius, moving to block him whenever he wandered too close to the edge of the clearing, where the undergrowth grew thick and potentially dangerous. Sarah marveled at how quickly the mare had adapted to motherhood, how instinctively she knew what to do despite never having raised a foal before. It was a reminder that some knowledge did not need to be taught, that it lived in the blood and bones of every creature, waiting to be awakened when the time came. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah began to think practically about their situation. They were deep in the forest, at least a 40-minute walk from the sanctuary, assuming they took the most direct route. Moving Athena and a newborn foal through the woods would be challenging under the best circumstances, and these were far from the best circumstances. The colt was still unsteady on his feet, and Athena, though recovered somewhat from the ordeal of birth, was clearly exhausted. Sarah knew that pushing them to move too soon could be dangerous, could result in injury to the colt, or unnecessary stress to both mother and baby. Yet staying here overnight presented its own set of risks. The temperature would drop significantly once the sun set, and while the clearing offered some protection, it was not the warm, safe environment of the barn. Sarah weighed her options carefully, her mind running through various scenarios and their potential outcomes. She could attempt to lead Athena and the colt back to the sanctuary now, while there was still plenty of daylight remaining. The risk was that the colt might not be strong enough for the journey, that the rough terrain and distance could exhaust him to the point of collapse or injury. Alternatively, she could stay here with them, maintaining her vigil through the night, but that meant spending hours in the wilderness without proper supplies, without shelter, and most importantly, without the medical equipment that might be needed if complications arose. A third option presented itself as she considered the situation from every angle. She could leave Athena and the colt here temporarily, hike back to the sanctuary, gather reinforcements and supplies, and return with help. This option made her deeply uncomfortable. The thought of abandoning them even briefly, going against every protective instinct she possessed. Her deliberation was interrupted by a sound that made her heart leap with hope. In the distance, still faint but unmistakable, she heard someone calling her name. The voice carried through the trees, distorted slightly by the acoustics of the forest but recognizable nonetheless. It was Dr. Rodriguez, and she was not alone. Sarah could hear multiple voices now, calling out, searching for her in the maze of trails and undergrowth. She stood up from her log and cupped her hands around her mouth, shouting back with all the volume she could muster. Her voice echoed off the trees, and she continued calling at intervals, creating an auditory beacon that would guide the rescue party to their location. Within minutes, the voices grew louder and closer, and then Dr. Rodriguez emerged from the tree line on the far side of the clearing, followed by 3 other figures. Sarah recognized them immediately. There was Tom, her neighbor, who owned the farm adjacent to her sanctuary, a sturdy man in his 60s with decades of experience handling livestock. Behind him came Marcus, Tom's adult son, carrying what appeared to be a large canvas tarp and several blankets. The 4th person was Emma, a veterinary technician who often assisted Dr. Rodriguez and whom Sarah had worked with many times over the years. The relief that flooded through Sarah at seeing this small army of helpers was so intense that her knees actually went weak for a moment. Dr. Rodriguez took in the scene with one sweeping professional glance, her eyes moving from Athena to the colt to the placenta that Sarah had set aside for examination. Her expression softened into a smile of genuine pleasure and relief. The veterinarian approached Athena with the calm confidence of someone who had attended hundreds of births, speaking softly to the mare as she drew closer. Athena, who knew Dr. Rodriguez well from all the prenatal visits, accepted her presence without alarm, though she kept herself positioned between the doctor and her foal, that protective maternal instinct still governing her behavior. Dr. Rodriguez conducted a quick but thorough examination of both mother and baby, her skilled hands moving with practiced efficiency as she checked vital signs, examined the colt's umbilical stump, assessed Athena's condition, and inspected the placenta that Sarah had preserved. After several minutes of careful observation, she straightened up and gave Sarah a thumbs-up sign. "Everything looked good," she announced. Both mare and foal appeared healthy and strong, and while they would need monitoring over the coming days, there were no immediate concerns that would prevent them from being moved. The news lifted a weight from Sarah's shoulders that she had not fully realized she was carrying. Tom and Marcus had already begun setting up a makeshift transport system. They unfolded the large tarp and several blankets, creating a soft, mobile bed that could be used if the colt became too tired to walk. Tom explained that they had brought rope as well, in case they needed to fashion a travois to drag the exhausted foal, though he hoped it would not come to that. Emma unpacked a backpack filled with supplies, including high-energy supplements for Athena, sterile wound dressing, additional iodine solution, and even a thermos of hot coffee that she pressed into Sarah's grateful hands. The warmth of the liquid and the caffeine it contained were exactly what Sarah needed after the stress and adrenaline of the past few hours. They formulated a plan as they stood in the clearing, all 5 humans contributing their knowledge and experience to create the safest strategy for getting mare and foal back to the sanctuary. Tom suggested they take the longer but gentler southern trail, which had fewer steep sections and less dense undergrowth. Marcus pointed out that the sun would set in approximately 3 hours, giving them a comfortable window to complete the journey without rushing. Dr. Rodriguez recommended giving Athena and the colt another 30 minutes to rest and bond before attempting to move them, allowing the foal to nurse once more if he wanted, and giving Athena time to recover a bit more strength. Sarah agreed with all of these suggestions, grateful to have the burden of decision-making shared among capable, experienced people who genuinely cared about the welfare of her horses. While they waited, Emma set up a portable examination area and helped Dr. Rodriguez give Athena a more comprehensive post-birth checkup. They listened to her heart and lungs, took her temperature, checked for any signs of internal tearing or excessive bleeding, and administered a dose of antibiotics as a precautionary measure against infection. The colt received his own examination, with Dr. Rodriguez carefully checking his mouth to ensure he had a proper suckle reflex, examining his eyes for any abnormalities, palpating his small body to check for structural issues, and watching him move to assess his coordination and strength. She pronounced him a perfect specimen of foal health, commenting that he appeared to be at the larger end of the size spectrum for newborn percherons, which boded well for his future development. As the appointed 30 minutes passed, the group began the careful process of preparing Athena and her colt for the journey home. Tom approached the mare first, holding a soft lead rope that he clipped gently to Athena's halter, speaking to her in the low, measured tones that experienced horsemen use to convey calm and confidence. Athena accepted the rope without resistance, though her attention remained focused primarily on her colt, who was exploring the clearing with increasingly bold ventures away from his mother's side. Each time he wandered more than a few feet from Athena, she would shift her position to keep him within easy reach, her maternal vigilance never wavering even as she prepared to follow Tom's guidance. Sarah gathered her emergency kit and the supplies Emma had brought, distributing the load among the group so that everyone carried something, but no one was overburdened. The colt would be the key to their success or failure in this endeavor. If he remained strong and mobile, following his mother's lead naturally, they would make good time and arrive at the sanctuary well before dark. If he faltered, if exhaustion or fear caused him to refuse to walk, they would need to implement their backup plan of carrying or dragging him on the makeshift transport. Dr. Rodriguez positioned herself near the colt, ready to monitor his condition throughout the journey and alert the group if she noticed any signs of distress or fatigue. Marcus took point, leading the way with a machete to clear any obstacles from their path and ensure the trail remained passable for a newborn foal with uncertain footing. Emma walked alongside Sarah, both women bringing up the rear of their small procession, keeping watch for any dangers that might approach from behind. They set off slowly, Tom leading Athena with infinite patience, allowing her to set the pace rather than trying to hurry her. The giant mare moved with deliberate care, constantly checking over her shoulder to ensure her colt was following. The baby stayed close to his mother's flank, his gangly legs moving in an awkward but determined gait as he worked to keep up. The southern trail that Tom had suggested proved to be a wise choice. Though longer than the direct route Sarah had taken to reach the clearing, it wound through the forest on a gentler grade, avoiding the steepest sections and the densest undergrowth. The path was wide enough in most places for Athena and her colt to walk side by side, which seemed to give both of them confidence and comfort. The forest was beautiful in the late afternoon light, with golden rays slanting through the canopy and illuminating patches of ferns that glowed an almost luminescent green. Birds sang their evening songs from the branches overhead, and occasionally a squirrel would scold them from the safety of a high perch, chattering its displeasure at having its territory invaded by this strange parade. Sarah found herself able to appreciate the beauty of their surroundings now that the immediate crisis had passed and help had arrived. She thought about how terrified she had been just a few hours ago, running into the forest with nothing but her emergency kit and her determination to save Athena and her unborn foal. The fear seemed distant now, replaced by a profound sense of gratitude and wonder at how everything had unfolded. They had been walking for about 20 minutes when the colt showed his first signs of fatigue. His steps became less certain, his head drooped slightly, and he began to lag a few paces behind Athena, rather than maintaining his position at her side. Dr. Rodriguez noticed immediately and signaled for the group to stop. They found a relatively flat area just off the trail where Athena could stand comfortably, and everyone took the opportunity to rest while the colt nursed again. The break lasted 10 minutes, during which time Athena drank deeply from a collapsible water bucket that Emma produced from her pack, replenishing the fluid she had lost during birth and the subsequent exertion of the walk. The colt, refreshed by his meal and the brief rest, seemed to regain his energy, and when they resumed their journey, his step was noticeably livelier. The trail continued its winding path through the forest, sometimes rising slightly, sometimes dipping into small hollows, where springs created muddy patches that they had to navigate carefully to avoid having the colt slip and fall. Marcus proved invaluable in these sections, using fallen branches to create makeshift bridges over the worst of the mud, ensuring that the foal's still soft hooves would not sink into the mire. Tom maintained his steady leadership at the front, his connection with Athena seemingly telepathic, each understanding what the other needed, without words. Sarah watched them with admiration, remembering all the times Tom had helped her over the years, always generous with his time and expertise, never asking for anything in return except the satisfaction of helping a neighbor. As they walked, Emma told Sarah about how Dr. Rodriguez had received her call and immediately contacted everyone she thought might be able to help with a forest rescue. Tom and Marcus had dropped everything they were doing and met the veterinarian at Sarah's sanctuary within 20 minutes. They had seen Sarah's abandoned halter and lead rope in the paddock and immediately understood the urgency of the situation. Tom had grabbed supplies from his barn, while Marcus loaded the truck with anything they might need, and Dr. Rodriguez had called Emma to join them, knowing that an extra pair of skilled hands might prove essential. The four of them had entered the forest together, following the obvious trail that Sarah and Athena had left, calling out periodically in hopes of finding them before darkness fell. The group continued their careful procession through the forest, each person attuned to the needs of mare and foal, while maintaining awareness of their surroundings and the slowly diminishing daylight. Sarah checked her phone periodically, noting their progress and the time, calculating that they were about halfway back to the sanctuary. The colt had found his rhythm now, his legs moving with more confidence as muscle memory began to develop, teaching his body the complex coordination required for walking. He stayed close to Athena's side, occasionally reaching out to touch her with his muzzle, seeking reassurance that she was still there, that he had not been abandoned in this strange new world he had entered only hours ago. Athena responded to each of these small gestures with patience and love, lowering her great head to nuzzle him gently before continuing forward. They encountered their first significant challenge when they reached a section of the trail where a recent storm had toppled a medium-sized tree across their path. The trunk was too high for the colt to step over and too thick to easily move, creating an obstacle that required problem-solving. Marcus and Tom examined the situation from multiple angles, discussing options in low voices, while the rest of the group waited. They could attempt to clear a path around the fallen tree, cutting through the undergrowth that flanked both sides of the trail. Or they could try to lift the colt over the obstacle. Both options carried risks, but after a brief consultation with Dr. Rodriguez about the safest way to handle a newborn foal, they decided on a combination approach. Marcus and Tom used the machete and their combined strength to clear a path around the left side of the fallen tree, creating a detour that was wide enough for Athena to pass through without difficulty. The undergrowth in that area was dense but not impassable, consisting mainly of ferns and small saplings that bent easily under pressure. While they worked on clearing the path, Dr. Rodriguez and Emma prepared the colt for what would be his first experience being handled by humans for an extended period. They approached him slowly, speaking in soothing voices, allowing him to sniff their hands and become familiar with their scent. The colt showed some initial nervousness, dancing away from them and pressing against Athena's side, but the mare's calm acceptance of these humans seemed to reassure him that they meant no harm. When the path was ready, Tom led Athena around the fallen tree without incident. The mare navigated the slight detour with ease, her bulk actually helping to widen the path for those who followed. Then came the moment of truth for the colt. Dr. Rodriguez and Emma positioned themselves on either side of him, their hands gentle but firm, as they guided him toward the detour. The foal balked at first, uncertain about leaving the familiar trail and entering this new passage through the ferns. He planted his feet and refused to move, letting out a small whinny of distress. Athena, hearing her baby's call, stopped immediately and turned to look back, nickering reassurance. That was all the encouragement the colt needed. He lunged forward, nearly knocking Dr. Rodriguez off balance, and scrambled through the detour with single-minded determination to reach his mother. Everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief once the colt was safely on the other side of the obstacle and reunited with Athena. Sarah noticed that the little foal's confidence had actually grown from the experience. He had faced something frightening and overcome it, learning in the process that he was capable of navigating challenges. This was an important lesson for a young horse, one that would serve him well throughout his life. They continued onward, the forest gradually beginning to thin as they drew closer to the edge of Sarah's property. The trees here were younger and more widely spaced, allowing more light to reach the forest floor and creating a more open feeling after the cathedral-like density of the old-growth forest. The sun was lower in the sky now, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Long shadows stretched across the trail, and the temperature was beginning to drop as evening approached. Sarah was grateful for the extra clothing she had layered on before entering the forest, and she noticed Emma pulling a light jacket from her pack and slipping it on. Tom and Marcus seemed unaffected by the cooling air, their exertion keeping them warm as they maintained their positions at the front and rear of the group. Dr. Rodriguez walked beside the colt, her practiced eye constantly assessing his condition, watching for any signs that he was reaching the limits of his endurance. So far, he continued to exceed her expectations, displaying a vigor and resilience that spoke well of his genetic heritage and his mother's excellent health during pregnancy. They paused for another brief rest when they reached a small stream that crossed the trail. Here, Athena drank again, and Sarah used the opportunity to dampen a cloth and wipe the sweat from the mare's neck and chest. The colt investigated the water with cautious curiosity, lowering his muzzle to sniff the flowing stream, but not yet ready to drink from it. He would nurse exclusively for the first weeks of his life, gradually learning to drink water and, eventually, to eat solid food as he matured. Emma took advantage of the stop to offer around a bag of trail mix and granola bars that she had brought, and everyone accepted gratefully, suddenly aware of how long it had been since any of them had eaten. Sarah realized with some surprise that she had not thought about food once since this entire adventure began, her focus so completely consumed by Athena and the foal that her own physical needs had become irrelevant. The final leg of their journey began with renewed determination as the group left the stream behind and pressed forward. Sarah could feel the change in atmosphere as they drew closer to familiar territory. The forest here was the section she walked through regularly when checking the fencing along the back boundary of her property, and every tree and rock formation felt like an old friend welcoming her home. The trail widened considerably in this area, and the footing became more certain, less cluttered with roots and undergrowth that could trip unwary feet. Athena seemed to sense that they were approaching safety as well. Her ears pricked forward with interest, her pace quickening slightly as some internal compass told her that rest and security lay just ahead. The colt matched his mother's increased speed, his legs now moving with a fluidity that would have seemed impossible just a few hours ago when he was first learning to stand. Tom began to share stories from his own experiences with difficult births and forest rescues, tales that spanned decades of farming and ranching life. There was the time a cow had wandered deep into the woods to calve, and he had spent an entire night searching for her with nothing but a flashlight and his dog. There was the mare who had foaled in a thunderstorm and refused to come inside, stubbornly delivering her baby in the pouring rain while Tom stood by with an umbrella, feeling utterly useless. These stories served a dual purpose, entertaining the group and distracting them from their fatigue, while also providing Sarah with a sense of perspective. What she was experiencing was not unique, was part of the ancient dance between humans and animals, between the wild impulses of nature and the careful stewardship of those who had dedicated their lives to caring for creatures great and small. Marcus pointed out landmarks as they passed them, a distinctive boulder shaped like a turtle's shell, a lightning-struck oak that had somehow survived and continued growing despite the massive scar down its trunk, a small clearing where he and Tom had once seen a black bear with cubs and had quietly backed away without disturbing them. Sarah made mental notes of these landmarks, thinking that she would need to mark this trail more clearly for future reference. She hoped there would never be another emergency that required her to venture into the forest to find a horse in labor. But if there was, at least now she knew the path and could navigate it with more confidence. Dr. Rodriguez contributed her own observations about the forest ecosystem, pointing out medicinal plants that grew along the trail and explaining their traditional uses in both human and veterinary medicine. Education was never far from her mind, and even in the midst of this rescue operation, she found opportunities to share knowledge. The light was fading rapidly now as the sun dipped below the mountain ridges to the west, though they still had perhaps 40 minutes before true darkness would descend. Sarah could see the edge of the forest ahead, where the trees gave way to the open pastures of her sanctuary. The sight filled her with profound relief and something deeper, a sense of accomplishment and gratitude that threatened to overwhelm her if she allowed herself to fully process the emotions. They had done it. Against considerable odds, in circumstances that could easily have turned tragic, they had successfully navigated the forest and were about to emerge with a healthy mare and her newborn colt. She sent a silent thank you to whatever forces had watched over them during this long, strange, wonderful day. As they broke through the tree line and stepped into the open meadow, a chorus of whinnies greeted them. The other horses at the sanctuary had gathered at the fence line nearest to the forest, drawn by some instinct that told them their missing herd members were returning. Willow and Storm were at the front of the group, as Sarah had known they would be, their ears pricked forward and their eyes bright, with what looked like genuine relief. Behind them stood the others, a collection of rescued souls who had found peace and safety in Sarah's care, all of them waiting to welcome Athena and her baby home. The sight brought tears to Sarah's eyes, reminding her of why she did this work, why she had dedicated her life to creating a sanctuary where horses could live without fear or pain. The colt's reaction to seeing so many horses at once was one of startled amazement. He stopped walking and stood frozen, staring at the fence line with wide eyes, trying to process this sudden appearance of creatures who looked like his mother but were not his mother. Athena nickered to him reassuringly and continued walking, trusting that her baby would follow as he had been doing for the past hour. After a moment of hesitation, the colt did follow, his natural inclination to stay close to his mother, overriding his uncertainty about all these new sights and sounds. The other horses called out greetings as the group passed, their voices creating a welcoming symphony that seemed to say everything would be all right now, that the ordeal was over and rest awaited. Tom led Athena directly toward the barn, where the large folding stall that Sarah had prepared days ago still waited, fresh straw bedding and clean water buckets ready for occupancy. The barn lights were on, casting a warm glow that looked impossibly inviting after hours in the dimming forest. Marcus jogged ahead to open the barn doors wide, ensuring easy access for the tired mare and her baby. Emma stayed close to the colt, ready to provide assistance if he needed it, but the little foal seemed to have found a second wind now that he was on familiar ground. He walked into the barn beside his mother with his head held high, looking around at his new home with the interest of a young creature eager to explore and learn about his surroundings. Athena walked into the foaling stall with the weary dignity of a queen returning to her palace after a long journey. The space was generous, designed specifically for large draft horses and their foals, with high ceilings and walls padded with thick rubber mats to prevent injury. The fresh straw rustled softly under her hooves as she explored the perimeter of the stall, checking every corner with the thoroughness of a mother, ensuring the safety of her baby's environment. The colt followed her movements closely, his small body pressed against her side, drawing comfort from her solid presence. When Athena finally deemed the stall acceptable, she moved to the center and lowered herself carefully onto the bedding, a deep sigh of relief escaping her as the weight came off her tired legs. The colt immediately curled up beside her, his impossibly long legs folding beneath him as he settled into the warm straw. Dr. Rodriguez entered the stall with her medical bag and began the final examination of the evening. She worked efficiently but gently, checking Athena's temperature and heart rate, palpating her abdomen to ensure there was no retained placenta or internal damage, and examining the mare's udder to confirm that milk production was adequate. Athena tolerated these ministrations with patience, clearly exhausted but still alert to anything that involved her colt. When the veterinarian turned her attention to the baby, conducting a more thorough newborn exam than had been possible in the forest, the colt proved less cooperative than his mother. He struggled against the handling, objecting vocally to having his mouth examined and his vital signs checked. But Dr. Rodriguez persisted, with the calm authority of someone who had examined thousands of foals over her career. After completing both examinations, Dr. Rodriguez stood and delivered her verdict. Athena was in excellent condition considering what she had been through, showing no signs of complications or distress. The colt was healthy and strong, with good muscle tone, clear eyes and lungs, and reflexes that were exactly what they should be for a foal his age. Barring any unforeseen developments, both mother and baby should do very well. She recommended keeping them in the stall for at least a week before allowing them access to a small paddock, giving Athena time to recover fully, and the colt time to develop his strength and coordination. Sarah agreed readily to these recommendations, grateful beyond words for the veterinarian's expertise and her willingness to drop everything and rush into the forest to help. The group gathered outside the stall, leaning against the railings and watching the peaceful scene of mare and foal resting together. Tom observed that in all his years of working with horses, he had never seen anything quite like this. A mare choosing to give birth deep in the forest, and then safely bringing her baby home. Marcus wondered aloud what had driven Athena to make that choice. What instinct had told her that the clearing in the woods was the right place for her foal to be born? Emma suggested that perhaps Athena had sensed something about the sanctuary environment that made her uncomfortable, some subtle threat that humans could not perceive, but that triggered her protective maternal instincts. Sarah listened to these theories but remained silent, her own thoughts running deeper than any simple explanation could capture. She believed that Athena's choice had been about autonomy and trust, about a mare who had spent years being controlled and commanded, finally asserting her own will in the most important moment of her life. The forest represented freedom, a place where no human authority could dictate her actions or interfere with the ancient process of birth. Yet, Athena had not completely rejected human help. She had allowed Sarah to find her, had welcomed her presence during the birth, and had cooperated fully with the journey back to the sanctuary. In making these choices, Athena had demonstrated something profoundly intelligent, a nuanced understanding that some aspects of life required wildness and independence, while others benefited from the support of trusted companions. The mare had taught Sarah a lesson about respecting the boundaries between human and animal, about knowing when to help and when to step back and let nature take its course. As the evening deepened into night, the group began to disperse. Tom and Marcus headed home with promises to check in the next day and help with whatever tasks needed doing. Emma packed up the medical supplies and loaded them into Dr. Rodriguez's truck, reminding Sarah to call immediately if she noticed anything concerning about either Athena or the colt. Dr. Rodriguez herself lingered a bit longer, standing at the stall door and watching the sleeping horses with a soft smile on her face. She told Sarah that moments like this were why she had become a veterinarian, why she endured the long hours and the heartbreaks and the emergencies that came at all hours. Seeing a healthy foal sleeping peacefully beside his mother made every sacrifice worthwhile. Sarah hugged her friend tightly, words inadequate to express the depth of her gratitude. Alone in the barn with her horses, Sarah pulled up a chair and sat where she could see into Athena's stall. The colt stirred in his sleep, his legs twitching as he dreamed whatever dreams newborn horses dream. Athena opened one eye to check on him, then closed it again, secure in the knowledge that her baby was safe. Sarah thought about the title she had seen on a documentary once about animal behavior, something about heroic acts in nature. What Athena had done today was heroic in its own way, not the dramatic heroism of saving a life from immediate danger, but the quiet courage of following her instincts, even when it meant walking away from safety and security. The giant mare had trusted herself, had trusted the ancient wisdom encoded in her genes, and in doing so, had given her colt the gift of being born in a place of wildness and beauty. Sarah decided that the colt would be named Forest, a simple acknowledgement of where he had come into the world and what that place represented. As she sat in the peaceful barn, listening to the soft sounds of horses breathing and straw rustling, Sarah felt a profound sense of completeness. This day, which had begun with anxiety and unfolded through crisis, had ended in triumph. Mother and baby were home, safe and healthy, and tomorrow would bring new adventures for the little colt named Forest. For now, though, rest was what they all needed, and the sanctuary wrapped around them like a protective embrace as night settled over Willow Creek Valley. The giant